I know I constantly attack Democrats, but that's because I see them as a threat to our country. I genuinely do. I think at this time in human history, there was a time, there was other times in human history where they may have been helpful, or some of their ideas have been helpful, but for the most part, the Democrat Party's entire goal has been to, I mean, take America back into a socialist progressive monarchy like we were when we were founded. So it's very hard for me to not look at what Democrats do, even though I'm an independent. Many people would think I'm a Republican, but I'm not. I am an independent, but I can't help but point out the constant contradictions that I see with the Democrat Party in what they say and then what they do. It's always different. It's always different. They say one thing, they do something different. They say the Republicans are for the rich, but yet they're the ones for the rich. They say they're the champions of the poor, but yet they are the ones stealing from the middle class and from the poor to give to the rich. It's unbelievable what we see as hypocrisy, and the followers of the Democrat Party are even more unbelievable. They truly just do not see what the Democrat Party does. I can very easily see what the Republican Party does on a regular basis that's trash. And I could go after that all the time. But we have a whole mainstream media that does that, and does that a little too much. So I'm just joining in from the middle here to come at these Democrats in the way that they need, called the truth. Because you either have to agree with them or you're a total enemy of them. And that's a scary way of thinking about life, and we need to caution against this sort of stuff, that groupthink mentality they have. And this video is a perfect example. I'm gonna let these guys do most of the talking, and I'm gonna pretty much stay out of this video a lot, but I wanted to intro it and show how, you know, Democrats say one thing and do another thing, and it's very consistent throughout American history, that if we really just look at the results that we're getting, then we can see that the actions we put forth probably haven't been the best ones, and that we could put forth better actions to get better results. I mean, we know that if we plant corn, we're gonna get corn, we're not gonna get bananas. So with that being said, I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, so I need you to like, comment, share, subscribe, do all that jazz for me. Let's roll into it.
This is a map of the 18 states in the US where Democrats control the legislative and executive branches, or else have some veto-proof majority in the legislature. Democrats in DC often blame the GOP for foiling their progressive vision.
When middle-class families see their taxes go up, they'll know Republicans are to blame.
But if you zoom into these 18 states, there's effectively no Republicans standing in the way. So my question is, what do Democrats actually do when they have all the power?
I think, you know, Americans tend to view politics as a competition of us versus them, and they tend to think that if they would just get out of the way, then we can do the things that we want to do. There is no them standing in the way. There's just the we of Democrats and their supporters, and they get to decide what policy should look like in those states, and that is an opportunity for them to implement their vision.
If you want to really understand what Democrats say they want, what their vision is for America, it's found inside of this document. This document serves as a guide as we zoom into these states to answer this question. What do Democrats really do when they have all the power?
We cannot, in good faith, blame the Republican Party when House Democrats have a majority.
To me, California is like the quintessential liberal state. From the state legislature to the whole executive branch to most of the big cities, Dems hold majority control. So what do they do with all this power?
Looking at California, you have to look at housing.
Okay, now wait, listen. When I hear the words housing policy, I tend to sort of doze off, but Binya insists that housing policy and what is happening in California is definitely worth looking at.
You cannot say that you are against inequality in America unless you are willing to have affordable housing built in your neighborhood.
Just for the record, where I live, I have affordable housing a block north of me, and I have affordable housing 2 blocks south of me.
neighborhood.
And Democrats completely agree. Here in this document, the word housing is mentioned over 100 times.
The neighborhood where you're born has a huge influence on the rest of your life. Children who are born in neighborhoods with degraded environmental conditions, with a lack of access to high-quality public services, poor schools, poor public transit, are at a permanent disadvantage.
And they even say verbatim, housing in America should be stable, accessible, safe, healthy, energy efficient, and above all, affordable.
Housing is a human right.
Housing is a human right.
The rent is going through the roof. Housing is a human right.
Human rights are what you are born with. So if you say, for instance, that housing, affordable housing is a human right, you're saying that it's a demand that there be a house for you. Now, that says somebody else has to pay for that. And that's where we start to really define these lines of human rights versus human wants. But this argument that something's a human right, I have a real hard time with, because our healthcare is a human right. You're saying that somebody has to go to school to be a doctor, to be a nurse, to be an anesthesiologist, to be all the different things that it requires to run a hospital and to provide surgery, emergency rooms, operating rooms, all the different services that are involved within healthcare. All those people have to go get degrees and do all of those things at their own expense so that then you can get that stuff for free. So this idea to say that things are human rights is to force for somebody else to pay for something that you aren't paying for yourself.
How does California do when it comes to housing?
You know where those signs are when you drive into a state, it says, "Welcome to California"? They might as well replace them with signs that say, "Keep out." Because in California, the cost of housing is so high that for many people, it's simply unaffordable. And so what you have is not enough housing and too many people trying to get it. And the inevitable result is that prices have gone up, and away.
The median price of a home in San Diego County is now a staggering $830,000.
All around California, there are cities full of people who say that they are progressive, they're liberals. They believe in a more equal America, a more diverse America. They show up to the marches, they put in the lawn signs about everyone being equal, but at the same time, they're actively fighting to keep their neighborhoods looking like this. It turns out that this is actually the result of specific policies, intentional policies that keeps these neighborhoods spread out and full of single-family homes, as opposed to higher density buildings like duplexes or apartment complexes. Yes, we're looking at a municipal zoning map of Palo Alto, California. Don't leave yet, this is really where it sinks in, so just stick around. So everything on this map that is yellow is zoned for single-family homes, like this and this. One family can live here. Over the past 8 years, the San Francisco area has added 676,000 jobs, but only 176,000 housing units. So a few years ago, the city council voted to change the zoning of one section of the city right here. Specifically this 2-acre plot of land. They wanted to change it from low-density housing to higher density housing so that they could build a 60-unit affordable housing complex for elderly members of the community. Okay, so they changed the zoning. Start building the 60-unit complex. No, the overwhelmingly liberal residents of Palo Alto decided to hold a vote to overturn the decision, to revert it back to low-density, single-family housing, back to yellow. And it passed, and the zoning was overturned. So now when you go to this plot of land, instead of an affordable housing complex for the elderly, what you're gonna see is this. A row of just a few houses, all of them massive and worth around $5 million each.
This is a perfect example as to who we elect. It actually matters. All of this stuff actually matters. We need to pay attention to what's going on. Know what the issues are in your local communities. Know what is going on the ballots. Don't just vote just to vote, just so that Joe Biden is the president, or so that Donald Trump doesn't become the president, or because you want Donald Trump to be the president and you don't want Joe. It's not about that. There is so much more going on in our political system than just our president and our senators and our congressmen. And look at it. Look at the actual local impact that all that housing isn't there. That probably would have, if it was for elderly, probably could have provided jobs as well for people who are in the medical industry, for nurses and assistants who would have been potentially helping those elderly people at that community.
I think people aren't living their values. You go to these meetings in these neighborhoods where they're talking about a new housing project, and it's always the same song, and it goes like this. I am very in favor of affordable housing. We need more of it in this community. However, I have some concerns about this project.
We have the hearts to do this, but we're doing it wrong, and we're dictating and harm onto the neighborhoods.
And then off we go with the concerns, and then nothing ever gets built.
And the result is that these neighborhoods are so expensive that they keep anyone out who isn't a part of this small group of super rich residents, many of whom bought their properties decades ago, and who spend their time fighting vigorously to keep the value of their real estate assets super high.
If you want to keep Palo Alto the kind of neighborhood and community that we all treasure, low intensity, low density, safe for kids to walk to school, you've got to vote against Measure D.
For a Democrat, he seemed very aggressive towards the lower class of our communities, the lower income people of our communities, to suggest that their people would be less safe communities, their children would be less safe and all of that. What are you suggesting about the lower income or the poverty-stricken people of our country? I mean, what are you suggesting in the way that you said that? I mean, as a Democrat who's supposed to be all about, Robinhood, taking from the rich and giving to the poor, you seem very anti-poor.
There's an aspect of sort of greed here and of nervousness about actually sharing those opportunities.
Up here in Washington State, the Democratic Party talks about taxation, saying that our tax code has been, quote, rigged against the American people. Democrats all the time are decrying the fact that tax cuts are going to the wealthiest Americans.
It is time for a wealth tax in America.
Democrats believe in a progressive tax system where the rich pay a larger share of their income than the poor. This is like the most basic policy vision of like a progressive movement. It's front and center in Democrats' policy platform.
But if you go and look at Washington State, what you find is that in Washington State, if you look at the state and local taxes that people pay there, less affluent families pay a much larger share of their income in taxes than the wealthiest residents of Washington State. So people like Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos, two of the state's most famous and wealthy residents, are in this lovely situation of paying less in taxes as a share of their income than the poor people who live in that same state. And
Bill Gates is also a wealthy and famous liberal supporter. So it's also interesting that, again, liberals, wealthy, getting breaks from wealthy liberals. The hypocrisy is so thick, it's unbelievable.
And this is a fundamental inversion of the values that the Democratic Party professes. There is no state with a more regressive system of taxation than Washington State. There have been some changes, particularly in recent years, but the overall situation remains resistant to change.
So I am very concerned that at this time, which is a very poor time to disincent people from creating jobs in Washington State, that we're even considering it.
From that paycheck that you earn, more of that money is going to state government. And so the effect of that is basically to exacerbate inequality.
Okay, so rich liberals don't show up when it comes to housing or taxes. Another major theme in this policy document is education. And the wording in here I find quite interesting. The Democrats say, quote, we must provide world-class education in every zip code to every child because education is a critical public good. In America, schools get their funding based on the real estate taxes of the houses within that school district. The more expensive the neighborhood, the more funding goes to the school. There's this one county that contains the city of Chicago. It's called Cook County. The residents here voted overwhelmingly for Democratic candidates in the presidential and senatorial elections last year. Often what would happen is that this would just be one big school district, and that all the taxes from all the towns in this county would be put into one bucket and distributed equally throughout the county. But the residents of this very blue Democratic county have actually decided to divide themselves into more than 140 school districts. So now you have all these tiny school districts like this one, which are like gerrymandered around the richest part of town. And so all of the taxes from these rich homeowners go into one little bucket and then only get distributed to the schools within this rich region of the county.
It can be on the same block that the town line runs through the middle of it. And if you live on one side of that line, you're consigned to an inferior education by virtue of the fact that you and your neighbors don't have as much money. And if you live on the other side, you're basically a member of a club that is sponsoring a private school, essentially, for the benefit of that small group of kids who are lucky enough to live in that affluent community. And the result is that poor communities have less money to educate their children, and rich communities have more money to educate their children. This is crazy. It means basically that the kids who have the greatest needs have the fewest resources.
Inequality in education opportunities is shameful, with some schools having huge budgets for their libraries and facilities, and others in the same state having to use duct tape to keep wind and snow out of their windows. Like, this is a real thing. The states could change this. They could actually just collect all the real estate taxes and then equally distribute them. But if you look at some of our liberal strongholds, that is exactly what they are not doing. But for some of these foundational democratic values of housing equality, progressive taxation, and education equality, Democrats don't actually embody their values very well.
We're talking, once again, about a system that's been rigged.
Republicans today are to blame.
What we're talking about here is that blue states are the problem. Blue states are where the housing crisis is located. Blue states are where the disparities in education funding are the most dramatic. Blue states are the places where tens of thousands of homeless people are living on the streets. Blue states are the places where economic inequality is increasing most quickly in this country. This is not a problem of not doing well enough. It is a situation where the blue states are the problem.
You can see that the Republicans fight on these national levels, huge national issues, big issues, but on the local small issues, it's been the Democrats getting in office and changing a lot of things on small local levels, and the Republican Party has ignored the small local governments, and that's where all of the little things built up to death by 1,000 cuts.
Affluent liberals tend to be really good at showing up to the marches and talking about how they love equality. They're really good at putting signs in their lawns saying that all are welcome here. But by their actions, what they're actually saying is, yes, we believe in these ideals, just not in my backyard.
People who live in blue states, people who profess liberal values, you need to look in the mirror and need to understand that they are not taking the actions that are consistent with those values, not just incidentally, not just in small areas, but that some of the most important policy choices. We are denying people the opportunity to prosper and to thrive and to build better lives, and it is happening in places where Democrats control the levers of power.
People need to be aware of who they're voting for. And voting for the Democrat Party has been a progressive downslide and decline of the quality of American life. I mean quality, the quality for every one of us. There have been places where the government could have given opportunity, could have helped out, and instead they haven't. They've mismanaged it and they've made a lot of mistakes, and it's been specifically the Democrat Party. It's like we're constantly Charlie Brown in the football when it comes to our government. They're constantly offering us something while that they're stealing something from behind us. Our government is not something that should necessarily be trusted at face value. And if you as a person don't see that at this point, I don't really need to argue with you about things. And with that being said, like, comment, share, subscribe, especially the last one, especially subscribe. I really need you guys' help out there. This is about facts. This isn't about feelings and about sides. I'm not a Republican. I would vote Republican over Democrat because I can see who's actually telling me lies and who is trying to tell me the other person is lying when I can see the facts myself. Thanks for watching. Later.